Welcome to Westbury Analytics Radio, where ServiceNow performance analytics for senior executives comes alive. Experienced ServiceNow architects, performance management experts, and other executives in your field share insights for how to drive performance management using the power of ServiceNow performance analytics. Performance analytics is a game changer, but it requires a different way of thinking than how most people think about reporting and performance measurement. Our goal here is to help you develop that new way of thinking. I am your host, Pedro Soto. In this episode, you get to hear from Julie Mohr, an expert in helping ITSM organizations drive change to become more efficient and create better customer experiences. She's going to share some insights about a topic that is very hot right now. What does it take to create good, meaningful conversations in a world of chatbots? These projects are risky, and you'll discover how to reduce the risk of implementing a chatbot in your organization.
Hello, everybody. This is Pedro Soto, welcoming back our listeners to another episode of Westbury Analytics Talk Radio. Our special guest today is Julie Mohr, an expert in helping ITSM organizations drive change to become more efficient and create better customer experiences. Julie is going to share some insights about a topic that's very hot right now. What does it take to create good, meaningful conversations in a world of chatbots? Now that this technology is being deployed in a massive way, it's really important to think about the customer experience, and it's not as simple as one might think. So Julie, thanks for taking time to join us. Please tell our listeners a little bit about you and how you got to be one of the leading consultants in the ITSM space before we dive into our topic about chatbots.
Sure, and thank you for having me here today, Pedro.
Sure.
I've been in the service management space for a couple decades now, and like most of the people that are deemed experts today, I started out as a practitioner in that space, so trying to figure out how to provide the best quality services to customers, both internal and external customers. And at one point I submitted a session to a conference and started speaking, and that's when I realized that I kind of gravitated toward helping others figure this all out. And so back in 2005, I started out as a consultant where, my career really took off from there because we embraced service management ideologies, helping customers to look at the way that they operate their environment and come up with strategies to streamline, provide better quality of services, but, focusing on the more complete customer experience instead of just operational efficiency. So it's been a great. I feel very honored to be where I am in my career. I can't say that when I started out I planned on doing speaking and traveling all over the world, but I feel very honored to be in this position and trying to help other organizations to continue that evolution and that journey.
Thanks for that, Julie. And that's really cool that you don't just focused on operational efficiency, but you also look at it from a complete experience perspective. Now, I know that you've been studying the deployment of chatbots and how they're impacting the customer experience. So what are some of the main things you've discovered?
It's interesting. I'm a small company, right? It's just me. And we call them single shingles, right? It's just you are the only thing in the company, and this huge craze around chatbots started hitting all of the social media channels, and all the product vendors were championing the use of artificial intelligence. And I'm a computer scientist. I'm a purist, right? I studied artificial intelligence at Ohio State when it was Lisp, and
Yeah.
I have enough understanding of artificial intelligence, to see how we arrived here, but I questioned whether we were there yet. So the only way that I could really get that practical, how does this work, was to develop my own bot. So I do a lot of education and consulting in the knowledge management space. And I have a plethora of data, the questions that are asked about knowledge management. And I thought, hey, I've got all this data and I have the ability to build a chatbot. I mean, I've been a programmer at some previous point in my life. I thought, let's try it. So it took me 5 minutes to get the bot up and running, and it cost me $0, zero. And I thought, okay, so the cost of entry, the path to get there is pretty easy, but let's get to the artificial intelligence part. And I started working with I used Google's platform, integrated into a WordPress site. And I began building the intelligence of the bot. And it is just incredibly difficult to do. And it sent me down this path of really analyzing what those problems are, what the hurdles are that you will eventually hit as you're trying to implement a bot in a meaningful way.
Yep.
And I've done a lot of research in the area. And I go out and explore bots that are out there and really look at how organizations are using this technology. So it's been a great journey, but it is by no means something that's easy to do. Even if you have great knowledge, there's a lot of work to be done. Now that work pays off, right? Once you get the bot working in an intelligent fashion, it can really help to improve your customer experience. But, my goal is to help organizations understand what those hurdles are and do their best to either avoid them or understand them enough to develop a strategy to overcome them.
What share with us some of those hurdles, some of the key hurdles that they need to think about?
I think the first hurdle that I hit was the different nomenclature that is built into these systems. The idea that there's a question and you have to understand the intent of that question, and then there's a response. It's pretty easy to take a set of FAQs and implement them into the tool. You're basically just filling, records in a database. This is the question, this is the answer.
Yeah.
But customers don't always ask it exactly the way that you phrased it. So the intelligence part of that is trying to interpret what it is that the question is and match that to an appropriate response. So the first hurdle that I hit was, succinctly putting that data into the system itself. There were a lot of questions that were kind of overlap. Yep. And building tables such that if you say hello, hi, what's up, right? They're all different ways of greeting someone, but they all require the same response, which is, hey, how's it going, right?
Yeah.
There's an acknowledgement of that, but the different ways in which humans can ask a question is just, it's vast. So the first challenge I had was managing that data in a meaningful way, so that I understood, hey, this is the exact same question that was asked before. I just need to add that question and match it to the response. So how you name those intents was incredibly important. Otherwise, you couldn't go back through this massive amount of data and find the matching question. That was the first challenge I hit when I started building it. The second challenge was, how in the world do I make it smarter? It has to be used. Yeah. And it was definitely not ready for prime time, and it still isn't ready for prime time. So I went with more of a social media, cloud sourcing methodology for improving the intelligence. I keep writing articles about it. I invite people to go and take a look at Sherlock. I call it Sherlock, the knowledge bot about knowledge. Bad choice, by the way. I get questions about Sherlock Holmes and all the characters of the book. And to be honest, I wanted it to have a character. Yes. So you have to come up with cute responses to these things, but yet keep them focused on asking questions about knowledge management. Um, and even though I promote this kind of a crowdsourcing development of the platform, I might get 10 users a month taking a look at it and asking questions. And 95% of the questions that are asked are really not relevant to the purpose of the bot. So getting it to the point where you're using it and it's beginning to respond with intelligent responses requires a lot of use. And you can't just kind of open that up to your customers and say, hey, go use this non-working chatbot so we can make it better. So the second hurdle is coming up with a strategy for the use of it. And I think I've kind of built a good strategy around that for organizations.
So is that hurdle put in a very lay person's term, more like the chicken and the egg conundrum? Because you got to get started, but before you started, you also have to think about getting usage so it becomes smarter.
Yeah, most organizations will have some sort of a single point of contact today that's managing a lot of those transactions.
Right.
And so what you're essentially doing is you're using it in that service.
Yep.
It's not being seen by the customer, but the agents or analysts are using the knowledge as they're working through, posing the question the way that the customer says it over the phone, seeing if it matches to an appropriate response. And that way you can either you're recording those transactions and using it to help improve the knowledge bot, or you're doing it real time while you're on the phone with the customer. So there are ways to use it with your existing staff to get it to a much more, let's just say a much more quote unquote intelligent layer or level.
But a chatbot implementation would come with some intelligence, either programmed into it or learned from other previous implementations, and then there's some calibration that takes place.
Well, the first level of intelligence is just building these rule-based tables, right? Question, response. The more data that you can put in there, and the more reliable that data, the more that you're starting with a baseline of intelligence. And that's just rule-based knowledge. That's it. There's no real intelligence to that at all, but it needs that to build upon. Now, many of the platforms also have artificial intelligence and machine learning that's built into that.
Yes.
And so that's where it then begins, based upon all that data that you've put in. If a new question comes in, what do I do with it and how do I match it to the existing knowledge? So they're looking for patterns in words, just like I had to be careful because my entire house is wired with these devices. I've kind of grown fond of them. I had to change the names though. My daughter's name is Alexa, and it was quite funny. She's one of those poor children that were born with the wrong name, unfortunately. But it's how those devices have evolved. The more that the question gets asked, then someone who is paying attention to everything that you say and do is looking at that data and going, okay, is this something that gets asked frequently? And if so, how can we connect to data sources like, how's the weather today? What's the weather going to be outside? It's a simple question, but being able to connect that to your GPS position and pull up relevant, meaningful information to provide to you, that took a while to build that so that it worked, successfully. No matter where you are, you can ask your phone what the weather's going to be like, and it'll let you know based upon that location setting. So it's the same thing with a bot. The more that certain questions are asked, the more reliable the responses become, and the easier the artificial intelligence layer has in determining, what that response is. And then, of course, our environments are not static. They're constantly evolving. We're rolling out new products and new services. So once it gets to that level of that base knowledge, it should be able to maintain some amount of relevancy to the environment. But there's people behind the scenes. We're going to have to work with our staff to help them have the right skills to be watching these systems and understanding, okay, how does that map to our existing knowledge base that's in there, and how do we make sure that we get this stuff updated? And so it's a lot of work behind the scenes to keep that operational, but eventually it gets to that level where it really, really connects with the customers, and they prefer it as a channel versus talking to people.
Wow. Have you seen some kind of pattern in terms of, is it a 3-month, 6-month, 9-month acclimation period, or does it differ a lot based on the size of the organization?
It differs on a variety of factors. One, what is the quality of the data that you have today? And I know when you and I initially began talking about what topic we wanted to cover, you know how important it is to have quality data to make judgments and decisions. So many organizations spend a significant amount of time cleaning up the data first before they can make decisions. And you can imagine it's very similar when you're putting this data into a bot interface.
Yep.
If your data is written, for example, let's say that you have this incredible knowledge base that's used by your IT staff to help solve issues when a customer calls in, and you've got a great process for embedding that into incident management and request fulfillment.
Yep.
If that knowledge is all written in the context of an IT person,
yes,
right,
Oof.
that does not translate well to a bot. A bot is really like an intelligent search engine. Based upon the question, it's going to match you to the precise response, as opposed to going to a knowledge base, typing in a question and having 12 responses coming up, and you have to go through each one to figure out, what it is. So you to map that, you really have to understand how the customer states the question. And the example that I use for this, and it's so simplistic, but it gets the point across. My stepfather calls me all the time for support. He says, "Julie, the internet's down." Right? It's true. But I know that he's having network connectivity issues. So if I write a knowledge article, I'm probably going to title it network connectivity and have, basic troubleshooting for how to figure out where the point of failure is. He's never going to find that or click on it in a knowledge base, right? Nope. But if I link to it from a question that he poses in a chatbot, the internet's down, right? I have to be able to communicate that answer in a very simplistic way to that user. So that's a great example of having this robust knowledge base, but it not being written in a way that easily translates to a conversation.
Because let's say you do a good job of taking the internet's down and your rule connects it to the article. But if the article comes back as network connectivity,
exactly,
it's going to just be confusing for your stepdad or for my sister who,
Shh, don't say anything. You hope your sister's not listening.
Yeah,
I know my stepfather's never going to hear this podcast, so I'm good.
I know. Wow, that is some I mean, really massive challenges because deploying a chatbot that gives a really bad experience, that is horrible. It's very difficult to bounce back from that, isn't it?
Well, and it's not like we haven't had a history in IT of jumping on a technology with the hopes of saving costs, only finding that it doesn't really result in the returns that we're looking for. This is just another example along that evolution where we run to the shiny object thinking it's going to really help us, and we don't think a lot about the underlying strategy. And that was the whole point of getting into this area from a research perspective, is that, I've been around long enough to have seen the pattern of what we do in IT organizations, and I wanted to help companies look at this technology without all the extra glitz that's provided by the vendors, which, that hype is a big part of people wanting, and it's generating the interest in leveraging this. but cutting through and understanding the challenges that you're facing is incredibly important. So it's interesting to me at the moment because I've spent so much time in the knowledge management space, and to me it was like
Yes.
a natural marriage between, hey, let's capture knowledge, now let's use that knowledge and a technology to automate this. But figuring out how to get there is not as easy as it sounds.
So there's one perspective, and I don't know if you've be able to speak to this, the role of analytics in improving the launch of a chatbot and the whole process that you've just described. It's probably important, right? Because you have to be able to tell when your chatbot configuration and your chatbot experience is helping versus when it's hindering.
So there are multiple levels of those analytics that you're talking about. I think the first layer is, are we getting a return on investment for the time and shifting of our focus from phone-based support to this channel that will hopefully help us to reduce costs. I think a lot of organizations go after this as a cost reduction measure and don't truly understand the magnitude of work and the different skill sets that are required. So paying attention to that, I mean, I wouldn't want to embrace any type of strategy where I couldn't prove that strategy was making a difference in the existing customer experience. So that ability to measure across channels, the effectiveness of those channels is incredibly important. And then translating that into, the financial side of things and being able to lower costs and improve the quality of the service. That's to me the most important part of that analytics. And unless you're measuring these things today, you're not going to be able to really show the difference that the chatbot is making. Now,
That's
there's
right.
another level of analytics, and this gets more into the knowledge management side.
Yes.
As this intelligence begins to grow within the chatbot platform, then there is, okay, now this becomes maintaining, improving. There's a lot of work behind the scenes to make sure that the bot continues to embed new knowledge coming from the environment. Where do we spend our time and effort? Do we take the top 10 questions? So the analytics that are built into the platform itself really can highlight, kind of like a heat map, where's the most important part of the knowledge base, what's being used the most. Obviously you would want to focus your efforts and resources on improving in the area where your customers are more likely to ask questions. So I think the analytics driving the evolution of that knowledge base and focusing our limited resources in the right space is another really important part of that. And you can never ignore the qualitative side of it. I don't want to just provide a bot that my customers will use. I want to provide a bot that my customers love to use. And
Yeah.
so there's a difference between what an IT person thinks is a usable service and what a customer may think is a usable service. And this is an area of research that I've been focusing in lately, which is, how do you build a conversation? Right? I can ask, is the internet down? And I can provide this very lengthy response. Everything's written in, one long response. That's not a conversation. That's matching a question to an answer. A conversation is, the customer, the one that I built into the recent article that I wrote is, the customer comes back, ask a question, how do I change the background picture on my desktop?
Yep.
And, you say, hey, you go to your control panel, you click on this, and they go, where's the control panel, right? how, right? The level of the customer's understanding will drive whether or not that one response is usable.
Yep.
So understanding the dynamics of a conversation really took me more into the side of the linguistics.
Yep.
And understanding how to maintain the customer's confidence. And this is a really important part of the adoption of a chatbot. When I know I'm interacting with a bot, I almost immediately bail on the experience because I know it's just not going to help me. It's not a question and an answer. I need someone with a limited amount of intelligence that can help to respond. If it were just as simple as looking up a knowledge article, I would have found it already. So I can't think that our customers are not that far behind us, right? They're becoming much more technology literate. The vast majority have grown up with technology. It's not foreign like it used to be when I started out in my career. So being able to hold an intelligent conversation and not lose the confidence of the customer using the bot that they're actually working with something that can get them to their resolution is a really important part of that. So it's taken me kind of outside the realm of IT. I'm exploring. There's actually some research papers that I discovered where they're IT organizations trying to figure this out. And I think it's a great place to think about when we start building these conversations. How do you make it so it really feels and maintains that customer's attention and satisfaction?
This is fascinating. So, Julie, if you're sitting in front of a CIO, let's say, what would be like some really good, concise advice to the CIO who's weighing whether to dive in or jump in the chatbot project or experience?
I think the very first thing is that you do not have to invest. You don't have to buy a product. You don't have to invest in anything. Just, bring together a collaborative team, someone that very much focuses on your customers, someone that understands the technology, and let them begin exploring. Why? One of the biggest gaps that we have is not understanding the technology or what it takes to make it successful. There's no one in the organization that's built a successful chatbot before. So either we got to bring somebody in or we have to develop that skill set. And because this is a long-term strategy for organizations, I really believe that building that skill set is critically important to making intelligent decisions. So, hey, it costs nothing. It took me 5 minutes to get this up and running. You could easily do that in an organization and begin exploring it. The second part of it is to manage the scope effectively. So taking on something like an Alexa device where you are trying to answer the questions of the planet is a very right. That's an expansive amount of knowledge, and you can always tell when you trip upon something that it doesn't know yet. It tells you, I don't know that one, right?
Yeah.
So that's generally not an acceptable response in a chatbot when you're trying to help customers to resolve things. So by keeping the scope very narrow at the beginning, what you're essentially doing is improving your odds of creating something that can be used. So if it is for, let's say you narrow in on request fulfillment, or you narrow in on, a pocket of knowledge or an aspect of service delivery where it can be effective. And then just, managing that scope, learn, improve, before you expand the scope out to be something broad, like, providing troubleshooting information for an IT problem. That has got all the problems associated with it as it does when we try to answer those phone calls at level 1.
Yep.
Right. And so the variety of calls coming in or chats coming in is a big, massive undertaking. But if you can narrow that scope and build your knowledge, build your understanding of the platform. The technology landscape is all over the place, just like any emerging technology.
Yeah.
And these companies that are doing good, you might think, okay, let's invest. They're going to be bought by someone else who really didn't want to build the technology themselves. They just want to go out and find a product and integrate it into their product set. So we're in that cannibalization part of the evolution where products are, if you look at like a Gartner quadrant for this, the number of product vendors in this space has just exploded. cutting through and finding out what's truth and what's the reality of what these tools do, that's on us. So some experimentation is easy to do. Get started. There should be no hindrance in exploring this area as a new potential strategy.
Thanks, Julie. And I would add that CIO keep very, very clear in their mind and in their mind of their team doing this work that you have to maintain the customer's confidence in the experience and the conversation that you eventually build, because that really nails it. I mean, one experience of the chatbot, and I know for me, I lose confidence, I click away, and I'm done. I mean, the chances of me trying that chatbot again within 3 to 6 months are extremely low.
Okay, so you have to stay away from Sherlock then. I'm looking for people that can make a difference here, Pedro. I'm not looking for a flash pan.
Oh, this is great. Julie, this has been really helpful for me, and I'm sure for those who listen to the podcast, they're really going to get some very, very valuable tidbits and insights on certainly what can help them avoid a lot of pain and negative experience with this subject. Tell us about something that you're doing, your company, you on the horizon, that folks could look you up and really get some more information on this subject before we close.
Yeah, my major focus right now has been in the knowledge management space. It's I went through that service management passion for so long, and
Yes.
and I saw how service management had limited success in organizations, and I know knowledge management can solve so many problems when done properly. So it's been an area that I've been passionate about. And of course, the chatbots is just part of that evolution of understanding how we can use knowledge more effectively. But I've been focused in on this disruption economy. How can we develop strategies that disrupt our current patterns and ways of thinking, and definitely be able to help any organization move down that general path and innovate and come up with new ideas.
Excellent. So where can they look you up? What's the website or LinkedIn profile?
It's julielmohr.com. So that's Julie L, middle initial, and then MOHR.com.
Excellent. Julie, thank you so much. I love this subject, the way you have framed it and shared from your experience. Just very, very grateful for making time today to chat with us and our listeners.
Well, I appreciate you reaching out to me, Pedro. This is fun.
Thanks.
We see a time when all business leaders using ServiceNow Performance Analytics will easily know how to leverage its power to help them reach their business goals. Performance Analytics offers you a way to do that. To discover how you can get there faster, send us an email to info@westburyanalytics.com.